In the forgotten archives of the Wisconsin Diocese exists a collection of documents that for over 160 years, the Catholic Church has attempted to bury. Detailing the systematic disappearance of 23 nuns from St. Mary's Convent near Lake Michigan between 1854 and 1862 are these papers. As administrative errors and misinterpretations, church officials have dismissed these records, but the testimony of 3 separate diocesan inspectors, along with a cache of private correspondence recently discovered in a sealed wall cavity during renovations, tells a story so horrific that even hardened historians have questioned whether such evil could truly exist within hallowed walls. What follows is the first comprehensive account of what many consider to be the most disturbing case of religious corruption in American history, a case that the Catholic Church has spent a fortune ensuring you would never hear. Before we continue with the story of St. Mary's Convent, I must ask if you're finding this tale already unsettling. Please subscribe to our channel for more historically accurate accounts of America's darkest religious secrets. Our community of mystery seekers spans all 50 states. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment below. Now, let's return to the Wisconsin countryside of 1854, where our story begins. Heavy over Lake Michigan hung the morning fog as Bishop William Quarter's carriage rolled through the gates of what would become St. Mary's Convent. With the intention of establishing the first major Catholic institution in the largely Protestant Wisconsin territory, the Catholic Church had purchased the sprawling estate, a former lumber baron's mansion surrounded by 30 acres of dense woodland. Part of a broader push to establish Catholic influence in America's rapidly developing frontier regions, where Protestant denominations were already gaining significant footholds, was this strategic expansion. In stark contrast to the humble wooden churches that dotted the Wisconsin landscape stood the limestone mansion with its 3 imposing wings and bell tower. Constructed in 1842, the central building featured Gothic arches and narrow windows that seemed to watch like eyes over the surrounding countryside. From either side extended 2 wings, the east wing intended for the nuns' quarters, the west for the proposed orphanage and infirmary. Behind the main structure stood a small chapel, its spire rising above the treetops, visible from miles away across the flat Wisconsin plains. With suspicion, local Protestant families viewed the arriving nuns. Their black habits and Irish accents marked them as outsiders in a community dominated by German and Scandinavian settlers. The region's residents, primarily Lutheran and Methodist, had grown accustomed to the simple democratic structure of their own religious communities. Foreign and threatening felt the hierarchical nature of Catholicism with its rituals and secrets. Outside the gates, a small crowd gathered on the day of the convent's consecration. Papists, muttered Elijah Hoffman, a respected elder at the local Lutheran church, as he watched the black-robed figures process into the chapel. They'll bring their foreign ways here, corrupt our children with their idolatry. Grimly nodded his companion, Wilhelm Schmidt. My grandfather fled Germany to escape the Catholics' persecution. Now they follow us even here. This sentiment, though not universal, reflected the deep religious tensions that would form the backdrop for the tragedy to come. A beacon of God's mercy in this wilderness, St. Mary's will serve, Bishop Quarter announced to the small gathering of clergy and local dignitaries at the consecration ceremony. Through the newly completed chapel, his voice echoed where morning light filtered through simple stained glass windows, casting pools of colored light across the wooden pews. Under the guidance of Mother Superior Catherine Murphy, this convent will offer shelter to orphans, comfort to widows, and healing to the sick. The 3 women who would lead the convent were introduced by the bishop, his Boston accent echoing off the stone walls: Mother Superior Catherine, Sister Elizabeth Foster, and Sister Margaret Clark, all from established convents in the East. Tall and imposing in her crisp black habit stood Mother Superior Catherine, her sharp features and penetrating gaze commanding instant respect. At 42, she carried herself with the confidence of a woman accustomed to authority. Elegant but strong were her hands, when raised in prayer, hands that looked equally capable of comforting a child or disciplining a wayward novice. Those who met her often commented on her eyes, an unusual pale blue that seemed to see through pretense. With the highest recommendations, Mother Catherine comes to us, the bishop continued. Her work at St. Augustine's in Boston has prepared her well for the challenges of frontier religious life. Sister Elizabeth, 38, with her perpetual smile and soft voice, would oversee the orphanage. Plump and maternal with rosy cheeks and gentle hands, she seemed perfectly suited to care for abandoned children. With a slight hesitation, she always spoke, as if carefully considering each word, a trait that many initially interpreted as thoughtfulness rather than calculation. Sister Margaret, 35, with her extensive knowledge of herbal remedies, would establish the infirmary. Tall and thin, with a serious demeanor and nimble fingers, she carried herself with the precision of someone who measured medicines by the drop. Nothing was missed by her dark eyes, and her knowledge of both traditional and modern medical practices had impressed physicians in Boston and New York. The founding community was completed by 20 younger nuns, most in their 20s and newly arrived from Ireland. In a perfect line they stood, habits crisp, heads bowed in appropriate humility, as Bishop Quarter blessed each by name: Sister Agnes O'Connor, Sister Bernadette Walsh, Sister Teresa Donovan, Sister Mary Collins, young women who had left behind family and homeland to serve God in a strange new country. Their faces, though solemn during the ceremony, occasionally betrayed their youth and uncertainty when they thought no one was watching. Called to this wilderness, the Lord has called us, Mother Catherine addressed her sisters that first evening, candlelight casting long shadows across the refectory. In the air hung the smell of fresh bread and weak tea, and through the stone walls seeped the chill of the Wisconsin autumn despite the large fireplace at the room's end. Hardships unknown to our Eastern counterparts, we will face. Suspicion from those who fear our faith, we will encounter. But through devotion and sacrifice, we shall overcome. Like a lifeline in this strange new world, the young nuns, far from home and family, clung to her words. Do you think the locals will ever accept us? Sister Agnes whispered to Sister Bernadette as they prepared for bed that night, their narrow cot separated by barely an arm's length in the dormitory-style sleeping quarters. Slightly trembled her voice, betraying the brave face she had maintained all day. In the darkness, Sister Bernadette squeezed her hand. They feared our Lord, too, at first. Through our works, we must show them that we mean only good. At the sound of footsteps in the corridor, the whispered conversation ended abruptly, Mother Catherine making her rounds, ensuring all was in order on their first night. Quickly, the convent established itself as a functioning religious community. The daily rhythm of prayers began with matins at 3 a.m., the bells tolling, cutting through the pre-dawn darkness, summoning sleepy nuns from warm beds to cold chapel floors. 7 times daily, the distinctive drone of Latin chants filled the chapel, from those early morning prayers through to Compline at 9 p.m. As much a part of the local landscape as the wind through the pines or the distant lowing of cattle became the sound. Between prayers, the nuns operated a small orphanage for abandoned children, tended the sick in a modest infirmary, and maintained extensive vegetable gardens. A strict schedule their days followed: prayer, work, simple meals, brief recreation, more prayer, a rhythm designed to focus the mind on God and service rather than individual comfort or desire. By the winter of 1854, the orphanage housed 12 children, mostly the offspring of Irish immigrant labourers who had died in railway or lumber accidents. With apparent tenderness, Sister Elizabeth oversaw their care, teaching basic letters and numbers alongside Catholic doctrine. On Sundays, local families would sometimes visit after Mass, bringing small treats for the children and occasionally inquiring about adoption. Modestly began Sister Margaret's infirmary, but it quickly gained respect among local families. Her knowledge of traditional remedies, poultices for inflammation, herbal teas for fevers, special compresses for chest ailments, proved effective, especially during the harsh Wisconsin winter when doctor visits required dangerous travel through snow-choked roads. Even the most skeptical neighbors were impressed by their self-sufficiency, and gradually the local attitude shifted from suspicion to grudging respect. They keep to themselves, but they do good work, Elijah Hoffman admitted grudgingly to his congregation after Sister Margaret had successfully treated his grandson's persistent cough. Their ways are not our ways, but perhaps in this big country, there is room for different paths to heaven. At 23, Sister Agnes O'Connor was among the youngest nuns at St. Mary's. A rare glimpse into the early days of the convent is provided by her letters home to Ireland, preserved in the Dublin Diocesan Archive. With observations about her new life, her careful penmanship filled pages, though close readers might note the gradually changing tone as months passed. Harder than I ever imagined is the work, she wrote in December 1854, the paper bearing smudges, suggesting tears had fallen as she wrote. From washing linens in ice-cold water, my hands are raw, and during morning prayers, the chapel stones feel like ice beneath our knees. But that our sacrifices please God, Mother Catherine assures us. Particularly kind has Sister Elizabeth been, helping me adjust to this strange country. On the coldest nights, she brings me extra blankets, and such patience has she shown in teaching me the proper care of the orphans. During a fever that swept through the orphanage last month, Sister Margaret's remedies saved us, she continued. With such heat, the children burned that we feared we would lose them all. But her tincture of willow bark and honey brought down their temperatures. I believe we are doing God's work, though I confess some nights, I still cry myself to sleep, missing the green hills of home. What these letters do not reveal, what Sister Agnes herself might not have fully comprehended, were the subtle changes already taking place within St. Mary's walls. Mother Catherine's leadership style, initially merely strict, had begun to shift toward the autocratic. Now resulted in increasingly severe penances, minor infractions of convent rules, previously addressed with gentle correction. As she attempted to darn a tear in her habit one evening in January 1855, Sister Josephine Brady's hands shook. Having accidentally broken silence during afternoon prayers with a sudden cough, she had been assigned to kneel on dried peas while reciting the entire rosary, a penance that left her knees bleeding and swollen. Sister Mary Collins helped her thread the needle, their eyes meeting in a moment of silent sympathy. Do not draw attention to her weakness, Mother Catherine's voice cut through the quiet workroom, causing both women to startle. She had entered silently, a skill that increasingly unsettled the younger nuns. That discipline is the cornerstone of devotion, Sister Josephine must learn. Each of you would do well to remember that. By the spring of 1855, St. Mary's had gained a reputation for exceptional charity. When a measles epidemic swept through the nearby lumber camps, Sister Margaret's infirmary treated dozens of workers regardless of their faith. From grateful families, the convent began receiving modest donations, and the good work being done behind those limestone walls was acknowledged even by Protestant ministers. What no one outside the convent realized was that in subtle, disturbing ways, life inside St. Mary's was changing. Increasingly silent affairs had become the communal meals, with nuns keeping their eyes fixed on their bowls of thin soup or plates of plain bread. The recreation hour, once filled with quiet conversation and occasional laughter, grew tense and muted. Like shadows, young women who had crossed an ocean together, bonded by shared purpose and faith, now moved, careful not to draw attention. In April 1855 came the first strange occurrence, when Sister Agnes failed to appear for morning prayers. Immediately, her absence was noticed, one empty place in the chapel where 20 nuns should stand in perfect formation. As Mother Catherine entered, her expression unreadable in the dim candlelight, the other sisters exchanged quick, concerned glances. Sister Agnes has been called to assist at our mission in Minnesota, Mother Catherine announced to the bewildered community at breakfast, her tone brooking no questions. Sudden was her departure, as such callings often are. For her success in this new endeavor, we shall all pray. Against her bowl clattered Sister Bernadette Spoon. But Mother, she said nothing to me. And she fell silent as Mother Catherine's pale eyes fixed on her face. Are you suggesting, Sister Bernadette, that a bride of Christ requires permission from her fellows rather than her superiors before answering God's call? Like frost, the question hung in the air. No, Mother. Forgive me, Sister Bernadette lowered her eyes to her cooling porridge. No one had seen Sister Agnes pack or leave, and she had mentioned nothing of a transfer in her letters home. But in the strict hierarchy of convent life, no one dared question Mother Superior's explanation further. That evening in the dormitory, several nuns noticed Sister Agnes' few possessions, her prayer book, the small wooden rosary her mother had given her, the extra woolen stockings for Wisconsin winters, were gone, as if she had indeed packed and departed. But Sister Mary Collins, whose cot had been beside Agnes, whispered to Sister Teresa Donovan during their brief moments alone in the garden, her cloak still hung on its peg. Without it in April in Minnesota, would she have left? Nervously, Sister Teresa glanced toward the convent windows. Perhaps for the journey, she was given a new one. We should not speculate, Sister. 3 months later, in similar fashion, Sister Bernadette Walsh vanished. The bishop has requested Sister Bernadette's assistance with a delicate matter in Chicago, Mother Catherine explained. Before dawn, she left to catch the early train. Again, no farewell, no warning, just an empty cell and a hastily provided explanation. This time, Sister Elizabeth elaborated during the nun's work period. Such skill with the orphan Sister Bernadette showed that the bishop has requested she help establish proper procedures at the new foundling home in Chicago. Her voice carried the appropriate mix of pride and pious acceptance, but Sister Mary noticed that her usually warm eyes remained cold as she spoke. By the winter of 1855, 3 more nuns had transferred to distant missions. The same pattern followed each departure. A young nun, usually one who had drawn attention for her beauty or gentle nature, would simply fail to appear one morning. Her reassignment Mother Catherine would announce, always to a location too distant for easy verification. Months later would return letters sent by worried families to these supposed new assignments, with brief, oddly formal responses that provided few details of their new lives. The responses, when examined years later by handwriting experts, would all be identified as written by the same person, not the missing nuns themselves. Sister Teresa Donovan was one of the few who dared voice concerns. Tall and strong from years of farm work before taking her vows, with a directness unusual in convent life, she had already drawn Mother Catherine's disapproval for questioning the increasing severity of penances assigned to younger nuns. Strange it seems that Rome would request so many transfers without proper documentation, she whispered to Sister Mary Collins as they worked in the garden in the summer of 1856, their fingers stained with soil as they harvested early carrots. The garden had expanded that year with a new section dedicated to medicinal herbs that Sister Margaret tended personally behind a high fence that none but she and Mother Catherine could enter. "And have you noticed it's always the youngest and prettiest who are called away?" Sister Teresa continued, her Irish brogue thickening as it always did when she was upset. First Agnes with her golden hair, then Bernadette with those lovely, singing voice, then Catherine with her perfect complexion, and Josephine with her, she trailed off as a shadow fell across the garden bed. Immediately, Sister Mary hushed her, glancing nervously toward the convent windows, where Sister Margaret stood, watching, her thin face expressionless. "Her reasons, Mother Catherine has. We must trust in her wisdom." The following week, Sister Teresa was gone. Called to a contemplative retreat in Montreal, was the official explanation provided at morning prayers. Now thoroughly frightened, Sister Mary kept her head down and her thoughts to herself. That evening, as she made her bed, she found a small piece of paper tucked beneath her pillow, a page torn from Sister Teresa's prayer book with a hastily scrawled message in the margin: "Something is wrong. If I disappear, tell Father Ryan." The sight of her friend's handwriting, the ink still relatively fresh, sent a chill through Sister Mary that had nothing to do with the autumn air seeping through the stone walls. By 1857, within the convent walls, the pattern had become impossible to ignore. Of the original 20 junior nuns, only 12 remained. The official explanations continued: special missions, retreats, transfers to nursing positions during disease outbreaks. To the outside world, St. Mary's continued to function normally. Local families still brought sick relatives to Sister Margaret's infirmary. Orphans still received care in Sister Elizabeth's orphanage. Nothing amiss was seen by Sunday visitors in the solemn processions of black-clad figures moving from chapel to garden to refectory. But inside those limestone walls, fear had become a tangible presence. In whispers spoke the remaining nuns, avoided being alone, and watched in terror as their numbers dwindled. More authoritarian grew Mother Catherine's leadership. Severe penances resulted from minor infractions of convent rules, days of fasting, nights spent in prayer on cold stone floors, public confessions of increasingly intimate sins. Discovered with a small piece of chocolate sent by her family, Sister Claire O'Donnell was forced to kneel before the entire community and confess to gluttony and deception unworthy of a bride of Christ. For 3 days, Mother Catherine assigned her to fast, taking only water and a single piece of bread at the evening meal. When on the second day, Sister Claire fainted during chapel prayers, it was Sister Margaret who revived her with smelling salts, her thin lips curved in what some later described as a smile. One unusually cold night in January 1858, Sister Mary Collins awoke to muffled sounds from the cell next to hers. Through the thin wall, she could hear Sister Rebecca Murphy sobbing, then a sharp whisper she recognized as Mother Catherine's voice, "You will come with us now. Make any noise and you'll regret it." The sound of shuffling feet followed, then silence. Frozen in her narrow bed lay Sister Mary, heart pounding so loudly she feared it would betray her wakefulness. The floorboards in the corridor creaked, 1, 2, 3 sets of footsteps moving away from Sister Rebecca's cell. Then a sound that would haunt Sister Mary's dreams for years to come came, a muffled cry, quickly silenced, followed by what sounded like a body being dragged rather than walking of its own accord. The next morning, Mother Catherine announced that Sister Rebecca had been called to serve at a frontier mission in the Dakota Territory. Instruction there require the native children, and Sister Rebecca's patience with the orphans has prepared her well for this holy task. Mother Catherine's pale eyes swept the refectory, lingering momentarily on Sister Mary. Her gentle presence we shall miss, but in God's purpose for her talents, we rejoice. Shaking with fear, Sister Mary managed to maintain her composure through morning prayers. Between trembling fingers, her rosary beads clicked as she mouthed the familiar prayers, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. What had happened to Sister Rebecca? What had happened to all the others? That afternoon, while sweeping the corridor outside Mother Catherine's office, she overheard a disturbing conversation. The heavy oak door was not quite closed, and voices carried clearly to where Sister Mary stood, dust brush suddenly motionless in her hand. "The doctor says this one will fetch a higher price." Sister Elizabeth's usually gentle voice had taken on a cold, calculating tone that Sister Mary would not have recognized had she not been listening at that very door. "He says men pay extra for the innocent ones. With the timing, we need to be more careful," Sister Margaret replied, the sound of glass clinking suggesting she was organizing her medicines as she spoke. "Raises questions, 3 in 1 month. In his last letter, the bishop's secretary mentioned it." "Easily managed is the bishop." Mother Catherine's dismissive laugh sent chills down Sister Mary's spine. "Another donation to his cathedral fund, and his questions will disappear. Besides, well enough we've established the pattern. Nuns being sent to frontier missions or succumbing to illness during their charitable work, no one questions." "What about the Collins girl?" Sister Margaret asked, her voice dropping lower. "Too closely she watches. At doors, I've seen her listening." A moment of silence followed, during which Sister Mary's heart nearly stopped. "We'll wait," Mother Catherine finally replied. "Too plain to fetch much is she, and with her brother in the seminary, she has that correspondence. Attracts attention, disappearing too many at once. For now, Sister Rebecca will keep the doctor's client satisfied." Before she could be discovered, Sister Mary fled, her mind racing. What had happened to her missing sisters? What terrible fate had befallen Sister Rebecca just last night? And who was this doctor they mentioned? The pieces began to fall into terrible place in her mind, the missing nuns, always the youngest and most attractive, the strange visits from well-dressed benefactors who toured the convent with Mother Catherine, the unexplained sounds sometimes heard from the locked north wing at night, the growing wealth of the convent despite its supposedly humble means. After a sleepless night of prayer and deliberation, Sister Mary made a desperate decision. During her weekly duty collecting eggs from the chicken coop, the only time she was permitted beyond the convent walls without supervision, she slipped a hastily written note into the pocket of Jimmy Fletcher, the 12-year-old son of a local farmer who delivered milk to the convent each morning. Widened Jimmy's eyes as Sister Mary's hand brushed his pocket. She had never spoken to him directly before. The rules forbade casual conversation with outsiders, especially males of any age. "Please deliver this to Father Thomas at St. Joseph's Church in town," she whispered, pressing a small silver cross into the boy's hand. The cross had been her confirmation gift, the only item of value she possessed. "Tell no one else. Lives depend on it." Solemnly, the boy nodded, his freckled face serious beyond his years. "Yes, sister. I promise." The note, which has been preserved in diocesan records, read simply, "Something evil happens at St. Mary's. Nuns disappearing, not sent away as claimed. I fear for my life. Please send help. Sister Mary Collins." Father Thomas Ryan, the young Irish priest who received the note, had always harbored reservations about Mother Catherine. During his monthly visits to offer Mass at the convent, he had noticed the dwindling number of nuns and found Mother Catherine's explanations vague and inconsistent. But as a mere parish priest, he had limited authority to question a Mother Superior. Father Ryan paced his small study, the worn floorboards creaking beneath his feet as he read and reread Sister Mary's desperate message. Heavy in his palm lay the silver cross. He recognized it as the type given to young women at confirmation, not something a nun would part with lightly. The urgency of the message, combined with his own growing concerns, demanded action. But what action could he take against a Mother Superior, especially one as well-connected as Catherine Murphy? Rather than confronting Mother Catherine directly, Father Ryan traveled to Milwaukee to speak with his superior, Bishop John Henney. A full day by horseback took the journey, the late winter roads alternating between ice and mud. He arrived at the bishop's residence with his cassock spattered and his resolve firm. In a comfortably appointed study, far warmer and more luxurious than Father Ryan's humble parish house, Bishop Henney received him. Initially, construction of Milwaukee's new St. John's Cathedral dominated the conversation, the bishop proudly showing architectural drawings and discussing funding with animation. "The finest cathedral west of New York it will be," Bishop Henney declared, his German accent still pronounced despite decades in America. "A proper monument to our faith in this Protestant wilderness." Appropriately, Father Ryan nodded, waiting for an opening to introduce his concerns. When the bishop finally asked about his parish, the young priest carefully laid out his observations, the dwindling number of nuns at St. Mary's, the inconsistent explanations, and finally the desperate note from Sister Mary. As Father Ryan spoke, the bishop's expression changed, his initial warmth giving way to a careful neutrality. "Serious accusations these are, Father," he said, setting aside the silver cross without examining it closely. "To my satisfaction, Mother Catherine has explained each transfer." "But Your Excellency," Father Ryan pressed, "in less than 3 years, 8 nuns have disappeared. For these transfers, no documentation has been provided. After they supposedly left, no one has received consistent correspondence from these women. Educated women the frontier missions require," the bishop replied with finality, rising from his chair to indicate the meeting was concluding. "Spreading rumors that could damage the church's reputation in this Protestant region, I'll not have you. In supporting our cathedral building fund, Mother Catherine has been most generous. Beyond reproach is her spiritual leadership." As he ushered him out, the bishop added with a note of warning, "On your parish duties, focus, Father Ryan. To those appointed by God for that purpose, leave the administration of convents." Discouraged but not deterred, Father Ryan left the bishop's office. If the proper channels would not address his concerns, he would need to find another way to investigate the mysterious disappearances at St. Mary's. The opportunity came in March 1858 when Bishop Henney assigned Father Ryan to collect the annual financial reports from parishes and religious institutions throughout the diocese. This official capacity gave him legitimate reason to examine St. Mary's records and perhaps find evidence of what had happened to the missing nuns. Through his heavy coat cut the March winds as his horse-drawn buggy approached St. Mary's. Different somehow looked the convent, the gardens more neglected, the windows darker, despite the mild spring weather that should have brought the nuns outdoors for their work. Less frequently now sounded the bell tower that had once rung clearly for each divine office, its tone somehow muted. By Sister Elizabeth was he met at the door, whose customary smile seemed strained. Dark circles beneath her eyes suggested sleepless nights, and her typically neat habit showed small signs of neglect, a missing pin, a slight stain on the white collar. "Father Ryan, we weren't expecting you today," she said, her surprise poorly concealed. "Indisposed today is Mother Catherine," she continued, leading him to a small, cold parlor rather than the comfortable study where he usually met with the Mother Superior. "The diocesan forms she asks that you leave, and by week's end she will complete them." "I'm afraid the bishop was quite clear," Father Ryan insisted, removing his coat and setting his briefcase on the table. He tried to project an authority he didn't entirely feel, aware that his youth and relatively low position in the church hierarchy worked against him. "Personally this year, I am to review the records. In several institutions, financial irregularities have been discovered." Entirely vanished Sister Elizabeth's smile. "That won't be possible today." In the infirmary, Our bookkeeper, Sister Margaret, is attending to a dying child. Then I shall wait. Father Ryan settled more firmly in his chair. Or perhaps while waiting, I could tour the convent. Since I've seen the improvements to the orphanage I've heard so much about, it has been some time. Across Sister Elizabeth's face flashed a look. Was it fear? Anger vanished quickly. As you wish, Father, though the north wing I must ask you to avoid. There we have several cases of influenza and would not want you exposed. The north wing, where Father Ryan had never been permitted to enter, ostensibly because it contained the nuns' private quarters. His suspicion deepened. The tour revealed a convent functioning far below its reported capacity. Where were the 20 orphans mentioned in Mother Catherine's reports to the diocese? Father Ryan counted only 7 children, all looking thin and frightened. When he attempted to speak with a small girl sweeping the dormitory floor, Sister Elizabeth quickly intervened, sending the child away on an errand. The infirmary, supposedly caring for dozens of local residents, contained only 3 elderly patients, none showing signs of the reported influenza. Nowhere to be seen was Sister Margaret, despite her supposed attendance on a dying child. Most disturbing was the clear reduction in nuns. Just 3 months earlier, Father Ryan had offered Mass at St. Mary's and recalled at least 15 nuns in attendance. Today he counted only 8, including Sister Elizabeth. When he inquired about specific nuns he remembered, Sister Rebecca, Sister Josephine, Sister Clare, he received the same vague responses about transfers and special missions. And Sister Mary Collins, he asked casually as they passed the laundry room, where 2 nuns worked silently at large wash tubs, steam rising around their reddened hands. Slightly faltered Sister Elizabeth's step. To our mission in St. Louis, Sister Mary has been assigned. Just last week she left. Particularly suited to the work there made her experience with the orphans. Nodded Father Ryan, hiding his alarm. The author of the desperate note was now among the disappeared. His suspicions now fully aroused, he requested to see the convent's chapel before departing. The chapel, once immaculate, showed subtle signs of neglect, dust on the altar rails, unpolished candlesticks, wilting flowers that should have been replaced. The sacred space that had once housed 23 nuns in prayer now felt hollow, as if the very stone sensed the wrongness that had infiltrated St. Mary's. While Sister Elizabeth was momentarily distracted by a message from a novice, Father Ryan slipped through a side door he knew led to the residential wing. Eerily silent for mid-afternoon was the corridor. Many of the cells stood empty, personal items gone, as if their occupants had indeed departed. As he turned to leave, a barely audible sound caught his attention, something between a whimper and a moan coming from behind a heavy wooden door at the end of the corridor. The door, unlike the others, had a substantial iron lock. Cautiously, Father Ryan approached, listening intently. The sound came again, definitely human, definitely distressed. "Is someone there?" he whispered through the keyhole. "Do you need help?" A moment of silence, then a hoarse female voice, "Father? Father, is that you? Please help us. Please." Before he could respond, the unmistakable voice of Mother Catherine rang out behind him, "Father Ryan, this area is strictly cloistered. Your presence here is most inappropriate." He turned to find Mother Catherine, flanked by Sister Margaret and a large man he didn't recognize, not dressed as clergy or medical personnel, but in the rough clothing of a laborer, with arms thick as tree trunks and a face set in a threatening scowl. "Forgive me, Mother," Father Ryan managed, struggling to keep his voice steady. "After visiting the chapel, I became turned around." Coldly, Mother Catherine's pale eyes assessed him. She had lost weight since he'd last seen her, her habit hanging loosely on her frame, but her authority seemed only to have intensified. Special spiritual direction, this wing houses sisters under. Essential to their devotional practice is their seclusion. Calling for help, I heard someone, Father Ryan countered, gathering his courage. Sister Anne, in the midst of her spiritual exercises, you heard, Sister Margaret interjected smoothly. Mortification of the flesh practice some of our more dedicated sisters. By those unfamiliar with advanced devotional practices, their cries can be misinterpreted. Mr. Callahan will show you out, Mother Catherine nodded to the burly man. To Milwaukee by week's end, we will send the financial reports. The man named Callahan stepped forward, his posture suggesting he was accustomed to enforcing Mother Catherine's will through means not entirely spiritual. "This way, Father," he said, his voice carrying a hint of menace beneath the forced politeness. With unnecessary force, the man gripped his arm. Of the locked door, Father Ryan caught one last glimpse. Who had spoken to him? What did she mean by "us"? How many women were being held behind that door? The moment his buggy cleared the convent gates, Father Ryan whipped his horse into a gallop, his mind racing faster than the animal's hooves. The voice, the locked door, the missing nuns, the frightened children, the intimidating presence of the man called Callahan, all pointed to something sinister occurring at St. Mary's. This was beyond his authority as a parish priest. He needed official intervention. Bypassing Bishop Henny, whom he now suspected of either complicity or willful ignorance, Father Ryan sent an urgent telegram to Archbishop John Hughes in New York. Grave concerns regarding St. Mary's Convent, Wisconsin. Suspicious disappearances of multiple nuns, evidence of imprisonment, possible danger to remaining sisters. Request immediate diocesan investigation. Local bishop unresponsive. Father Thomas Ryan, St. Joseph's Parish. If you're feeling a chill down your spine as our story unfolds, you're not alone. Physical reactions to these dark historical accounts are often reported by our community of mystery seekers. Take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who appreciates true historical mysteries. Your engagement helps us continue uncovering America's hidden secrets. Now, as we return to 1858, a storm is brewing over St. Mary's Convent that will reveal horrors beyond imagination. Swiftly responded Archbishop Hughes, known for his no-nonsense approach to diocesan management. Rather than alerting Bishop Henny, he dispatched his personal secretary, Monsignor Patrick Kelly, to conduct a surprise inspection of St. Mary's. Of course, Monsignor. Nothing to hide has St. Mary's. However, I must insist that you respect the enclosure of our cloistered sisters. Spiritual exercises some are engaged in that must not be interrupted. To all areas of this convent extends my authority, Mother Catherine, Monsignor Kelly replied, unfolding the Archbishop's letter and holding it before her. No exceptions. What followed was a day-long investigation that would later be described in Monsignor Kelly's 40-page report as unveiling a tableau of horrors unprecedented in the modern church. The inspection team split up, with Father Ryan leading Monsignor Kelly directly to the locked door in the residential wing while the other priests began interviewing the visible nuns and examining financial records. As they approached the north wing, they encountered Sister Elizabeth blocking the corridor, her usually pleasant face set in uncharacteristic determination. Entrance to this area, Mother Catherine has forbidden, Monsignor. In spiritual retreat, we have sisters. Sister Elizabeth, Monsignor Kelly said gently but firmly, with the authority of Archbishop Hughes, I speak. The door open or in violation of your vow of obedience, I shall be forced to consider you. Slightly cracked Sister Elizabeth's composure. What you're doing, you don't understand, she whispered, her voice suddenly desperate. Most displeased he will be. He? Father Ryan questioned. Bishop Henny, do you mean? Merely shook her head Sister Elizabeth, eyes darting nervously toward the windows as if expecting someone to appear. After a moment's hesitation, she stepped aside. The locked door, when finally opened under threat of ecclesiastical censure, revealed a shocking scene. 5 nuns, including the missing Sister Rebecca, were confined in what had once been a storage room. The space, perhaps 15 feet square, contained only a chamber pot in the corner and thin pallets on the floor. The single high window had been boarded over, leaving the room in near darkness, save for the light now streaming through the open door. The women were pale, malnourished, and showed signs of physical abuse. Their habits were torn and soiled, their faces gaunt with hunger and fear. One, later identified as Sister Josephine Brady, was heavily pregnant, her swollen belly incongruous against her thin limbs. Overwhelming was the stench of unwashed bodies and human waste. Momentarily,